After months of mounting criticism, the world's largest investment manager is caving in. BlackRock CEO Larry Fink says the climate crisis will be front and center of the firm's investment strategy.
With the impact of sustainability on investment returns increasing, we believe that sustainable investing is the strongest foundation for client portfolios going forward.
Companies that generate 25% of their revenue from coal will be removed from BlackRock's actively managed portfolios. That represents about a quarter of BlackRock's $7 trillion in assets. The firm will also use its status as a major shareholder to pressure companies to prioritize sustainability. The World Economic Forum, which will hold its annual meeting next week in the Swiss Alps town of Davos, will also call on other companies to do the same.
The growth has to be more inclusive, has to create more jobs, and has to be sustainable. And here we also mobilize the private sector in doing so.
According to the group's Global Risks Report released on Wednesday, the 5 biggest challenges that policymakers and companies will need to confront over the next decade are all climate-related. Those are extreme weather, climate action failure, natural disasters, the loss of biodiversity, and man-made environmental disasters.
The world is in a state of emergency, and the window to act is closing fast. We do not want to face continued political and economic disintegration.
Next week's gathering in Davos will be attended by 1,700 business leaders, 53 heads of state, and teenage climate activist Greta Thunberg. But the most high-profile attendee will be President Donald Trump, who pulled the U.S. out of the Paris Climate Accord. WEF officials say the climate crisis can only be addressed if everyone in the room gets the message. Paolo Montecillo, TRT World.
Well, let's dive deeper into the World Economic Forum report with Michael Jacobs in London. He's a professorial fellow at the Sheffield Political Economy Research Institute. He's also an economist and political theorist, specialising in the climate crisis and environmental policy. Welcome to the program, Michael. Now, this is the first time in the in WEF's history of this report, 15-year history that is, that climate risks have dominated their analysis. Does this surprise you, and how worried should we be?
It doesn't surprise me. I think the World Economic Forum has accepted what climate scientists have been saying for a long time, and what many of the world's civil society organizations and many protesters have been pointing out over the last year, that we are now, as the report just said, we're in an emergency. The World Economic Forum has been thinking about climate change for a long time. And what we need to see, in a way, is this idea of emergency really being taken seriously. We've known about this for a long time. It's not as if this has suddenly crept up on us. The degree to which the planet is heating and the urgency of the action needed. So the real question for the World Economic Forum, for all the business leaders and the political leaders who go to Davos, is, are you really taking this seriously? Or is this just another report which can, in a sense, pay lip service to the problem and you carry on as business as usual? This really isn't the first time that this issue has come to the leaders' attention. And the question is, are they really going to act now?
Now, the report calls for urgent action by policymakers, but also the business community as well. How urgent are we talking here? When does this response need to take place?
Well, it needed to have taken place over the last decade. We are way behind the trajectory that we needed to be on since we first started understanding the climate crisis. And so this is very, very urgent. So let's take the example of BlackRock, the huge asset manager. So it is withdrawing from its active funds from very polluting companies. But as the report said, that's only 25% of its funds. A huge number of BlackRock funds will continue to invest in fossil fuels, many of them through index-linked tracker funds and so on. So that's not good enough. And the question is, are big banks and governments around the world going to continue to finance the extraction of fossil fuels? In the end, this is quite a simple mathematical problem. We can only afford to emit a certain amount of greenhouse gases, mainly carbon dioxide, over the next 20 years. Most of those come from the use of fossil fuels in energy, transport, industry, and so on. If we continue to extract those fossil fuels, to mine them, the oil mining, the coal mining, the gas production, and so on, we will exceed that budget. So the question is, are we going to stop financing, particularly subsidizing those industries? And that, in a sense, is the biggest question for the financial sector. It's all very well to stop holding shares in those companies. The question is, are we actually going to stop that extraction process? Because if we don't, we are going to have catastrophic climate change. The mathematics of this is very simple.
Okay, now in terms of the private sector response, you mentioned BlackRock there committing to, I guess, pulling out of the management of fossil fuel-based businesses. Now, we know BlackRock manages a whopping $7 trillion worth of assets globally. This is a step in the right direction, isn't it? Are you hopeful that other businesses on their scale will follow BlackRock's lead?
It is a step in the right direction, and they are doing the same as a number of other asset managers have already done. So they're not the first in the field. They are the largest of the asset managers to do this, but there are some other big ones who also need to take the same action. But as I say, it's not just about the portfolio of shares they own. It is about the investment in new fossil fuel extraction. And it's also about the use of land. One of the issues which the World Economic Forum report covers today is biological extinction and the loss of biological diversity. And that is due to farming and agriculture and the land use, the supply of timber and so on. So there are a whole set of industries that need to look at themselves and say, are we contributing to this environmental emergency or are we helping prevent it? And that is true then for the asset managers as well. So it goes beyond the climate crisis. And of course, this year is the year in which there are two big international conferences at which not just the private sector, but governments, states, have to step up to the plate. There is the conference, the climate conference, which will be in Glasgow in the UK in December, so-called COP26. And there is the Biological Diversity Convention in Beijing in October, which will be dealing with the biodiversity issues. Yeah. So this is not just about businesses, but it's about governments too. And in the end, it'll be governments that force the businesses to comply with what the planet and its people need. So this is not just about business. Governments can't be let off the hook here either.
That's right, and we'll see how they'll respond at the Davos Summit in a few days' time. Michael Jacobs, thank you so much for your analysis on the program.